Hi, I'm Pete Holloway. I'm a retired financial advisor and a retired certified financial planner. And as always, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to On Money. One of the major things that happened at the beginning of this century was that what happened with Marcellus Shale in our region. Today, my guest is Greg Kozera. He's the Director of Marketing for Shale Crescent. A native of Pittsburgh, he went to Penn Hills and got 2 degrees from WVU, one in agriculture engineering, and the second one, was from Marshall, got a master's in environmental engineering. He was 40 years in the oil industry, retired in 2016, and started at Shale Crescent. He's married, has 3 kids, 7 grandchildren, and he told me he's got 1 great-grandchild on the way, which is great. Congratulations on that.
It's hard to believe.
So give us the history of Shale Crescent. What exactly is it?
It's a nonprofit economic development and research organization, Pete. What we do is market the region, and we branded in 2016. We branded this region: West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania.
Where are you located, by the way?
We're in Marietta. It's Shale Crescent USA, and it was leaders in that Marietta, Parkersburg area that looked at the region, and they said, "My gosh, we've got abundant energy. We've got a huge amount of natural gas. We've got a great workforce. We've got water that everybody needs with the Ohio River, and we're in the middle of half the U.S. and Canadian population, and nobody knows." And that was their mission. And originally they were looking at the mid-Ohio Valley, just that little piece. And they brought me on in 16 to do the marketing, and because that's what I did a lot of in the oil and gas side. And so my role was to reach the world. And the real mission of Shale Crescent is to bring high-wage jobs back to this region, back to this what used to be the Rust Belt, and raise the standard of living of everybody that lives here. And, you mentioned the kids and the grandkids. Guess how many of them live here in the region? 0. They're all in Maryland or Florida.
How many people are experiencing that right now?
Oh, my goodness. But now, what an opportunity. And, what was really neat is, we've been able to reach the world with our media. We were on Yahoo Finance, and we've been to Tokyo, and we're going to India Nathan, our president, will be there 1st of March. So we've actually had a lot of success reaching the world, and the governor, Jim Justice mentioned TCL, who's coming to, they're already under construction.
Just down the river.
Down the river. Well, we met them in 2018 at the World Petrochemical Conference. And that year was really neat because when I came on, that was the first conference I recommended we go to. And we went to that conference, Pete, nobody knew who Shale Crescent was. We sponsored the opening reception, and we all had to, these people we were going to see. We got 1 lead out of that, 1 lead, and it happened, I literally got on the elevator, we were in Houston, on the 28th floor, and there were 6 of us there, and we all had companies we were supposed to see. And Nova Chemical, that was one of my target companies. And, the antenna this guy gets on at 26. I looked at him, and I did a little, since I'm from Pittsburgh, a little Pittsburgh thing. And I said, "Chris, did you know that Shale Crescent USA, West Virginia and Pennsylvania, has the cheapest, most abundant natural gas in the industrialized world?" And he said, "No, I had no idea." I said, "Would it be okay if I called on you after this meeting?" The guy whips out his business card. 2 weeks later, we have a meeting up there. But that was the only lead we got. But what we learned was huge, because Nova, they were very open with us. And they've got their facilities up in Sarnia. They got crackers up there. Where's their ethane coming from? Here.
Oh, yeah.
They pipeline it up there. And Jerry James, president of Artex Oil, who went with me to that first meeting in Pittsburgh, he ran the numbers, and he said, "Oh my God, Greg," he said, "do you know how much money they're spending to get those liquids to Sarnia?" So that year in 17, we had a study done with IHS Markit, who looked at this region and compared it to the Gulf Coast, which is kind of the gold standard. I mean, if you're going to build a cracker, that's where you want to build it. And this guy, VP of IHS Markit, calls, and he said, "Greg," he said, "we thought you might have a slight advantage. We had no idea it would be this big." And that study, what it showed, and that's why Shell's where they are, is.
You're talking Shale.
Shell, now that we didn't help Shell.
No, but Monaca.
Monaca.
Yeah.
And what happened is we have the liquids, and what was going on until Shell's here, the natural gas liquids are being produced here. We have enough to do, I think, there was a study done a few years ago, 4 or 5 crackers. All those liquids are going to the Gulf Coast. They were being turned into polyethylene pellets. But what the IHS Markit study did was look at where the polyethylene's used. And the polyethylene, over 70% of the polyethylene demand is right here. It's in Ohio, it's West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Indiana.
Our mutual friend Joe Eddy. There's no way you don't know Joe Eddy, but when he was up in Wellsburg, he was constantly talking about having to watch the ethane, which is turned into these plastic pellets, but it goes to the Gulf Coast, turned into plastic pellets, and then comes back up here, which is in a very expensive process. Whereas if you had a cracker locally like Monaca, hopefully someday Belmont County,
Amen.
all that transportation cost goes out of the producer's cost, and it becomes much, much cheaper for them to do that. And one other thing I want to bring up, you'd say Marietta, and all the business is going to flow to Marietta. You're looking at 3 states, and you're treating them equally. So if an opportunity arises, whether it's Canton, Wheeling, Washington, PA, you're going to be working with that group to try to make things work.
We're agnostic on where that goes. And really what we actually do, matter of fact, we just to finish off what we started, that year, and they said a cracker built here is 4 times more profitable than one built on the Gulf, because here, where Shell is, they literally build on top of their feedstock and their energy, and they're in the middle of their customers. And normally in business, you get to pick one. Be where your customers are, be where your energy and feedstock are. They did it both ways. And then that year, in 2018, it was, again, amazing, but we were on main stage at the World Petrochemical Conference. Mark, a friend of mine, our chairman, Shredderman Agency in Marietta, he said, well, you can get us on main stage, can't you? And I said, Mark, you have no idea.
You're talking Exxon and
yeah, I said
this
you don't buy the main stage. I mean, that main stage is for CEOs or world experts. And I said, we're this little nonprofit. I mean, how the hell are we going to get on main stage? And he looked at me and he said, you can do it. and what's phenomenal about that is I'm a high school soccer coach. And we went through that. We were this team that couldn't win anything. And one young man said, Coach, our goal is we want to play for state championship. And long story short, Charleston Catholic, where I coach high school soccer, we've won 7 state championships. Because one young man in 1999 said, that's our goal. And I thought about it for a second. I said, well, it's unrealistic, maybe. And it was amazing how it all worked out. But I mean, because Mark built that belief in me, we were on main stage at World Petrochem. It was a panel, and and Hillary Mercer from Shell was part of the panel. Tony Palmer presented the study, and then we had their contractor. It's Jacob or no, the contractor was Shell. Well, yeah. But anyhow, we have this main stage panel, and when the panel was over, one of the things that we had the leader of the panel do is say, by the way, if you want the executive summary of the Shale Crescent study, it's outside at their booth. And I've been doing oil and gas, conferences forever and exhibits. It's the only time I've seen people run to my booth. I mean, poor Nathan was besieged. These people running out to get. So, for us, that was the first time this region has ever been on main stage. It had been years since we had done that. So the bottom line is it's changed the way people thought. Now, it takes a while because the Gulf Coast was the place. And our message is it's not anymore.
Let me ask you 2 things. Monaca is now on stream. It is working, correct?
It is correct.
Okay. Now it's only been 6, 8. It's not been that long. 6, 8 weeks. Is that about right, or?
They started. I think it was December when they actually
Oh, okay.
got in operation.
Okay, yeah.
So
So-
they're not
Is
at
it
full
working?
capacity.
Is it working to what the expectations were, or can you tell, is it too early?
They actually did. There was a video seminar yesterday that I listened to, and there was a couple Shell people on it. And they're still moving, they're continuing to increase their capacity, but from what I heard yesterday, everything seems to be going well. And to your point, you mentioned Joe, Eddie, and Eagle, and what's really neat is they're going to be one of Shell's customers. And I'm not telling you anything, it's top secret. Joe said it's okay. But can you imagine the difference, what that means? And I don't know what they're paying for product, but what they're not paying for is 1,100 miles of transportation.
Both
Because-
both ways.
Both ways. You think about it, they're going to ship the liquids to the Gulf, they're going to turn it into pellets, and going to ship them back here. And, Joe said, just think of what our inventory, how that changes. I mean, we have silos, we have rail cars, we have, and to be able to know that what Shell said, call us on Monday, we'll have your stuff to you by Friday. That's a game changer. And to your point, we work regionally at Shale Crescent. And one of the companies we brought in is a company from Central America called CRDC. We saw them at a conference, they spoke, and they have a process that takes all 7 grades of plastic waste, and they turn it into a pellet, and they use that pellet to make a building product. And they're in operation. We were at the ribbon cutting in October, and as we speak, they're taking 2 tons per hour of waste plastic out of the environment and turning it into a building product. Then they're in York, PA, but that's why
Well,
PA, Ohio doesn't
A
matter.
couple of things you're bringing up. One is that even though we say Monaca or Marietta, this is reaching into probably New England in some cases, or will. It's going to have that impact. And as time goes on, we're going to see more and more crackers around here. Why aren't we seeing them now? Because this is, I'm sure you're banging your head against the wall about this.
Yeah, it is a frustration because we should. I mean, we really should. And I think what we're going to see, and it may well be, there are 2 things going on. One, most likely, in our opinion, the next cracker probably is going to be a foreign entity. Because when we talk to the U.S. companies, that you name several of them, they're on the Gulf Coast, they're already
to get their
they're vertically integrated. It's like, and now here's where it gets a little comical though in a way, because can you imagine, pick a company, they got their crackers there and they're selling to this region. So we were having dinner with one of them after at WPC in 19, and they said, well, why would we build a cracker up there? We're servicing that area out of here. I mean, and Wally looks at him and he said, that's really not a decision you get to make. And these 2 smart guys all of a sudden realized that, oh my God.
Mr. Market.
Yeah.
Mr.
It's like-
Market rules, yeah.
And so Shell's here. So what do you think's going to happen if company B and C come in? Those Gulf Coast companies, are they still going to be able to sell here and convince Eagle that you should buy our product and we're going to ship it to you 1,100 miles versus getting from Belmont or getting from, so so they're probably, so what we're probably going to see, and we're already seeing, because we've talked to a number of companies that are dead serious about coming here. So that's, some of that stuff is already going on without mentioning names and times. But I think the other thing, we may see something even from those Gulf Coast companies, because I think a lot of them want to see how, is this Shell thing really going to work? But I was starting to say, the company in Pennsylvania, CRDC, they were doing a pilot. It was in New Jersey, and we were invited to see their pilot when they were doing this, and they were doing it was an extrusion molding company, and I said to the owner, I said, boy, isn't it going to be great when Shell's in operation? And he looked and he said, Shell? What do you mean? I said, well, you didn't hear about Monaca? And I said, let me put it another way, Bob. I said, what would it mean to you if you could call your polyethylene supplier on Monday and get pellets by Friday, because they're going to be over in Monaca, PA, and that's what they're going to truck. I toured the place last summer. They've got 82 truck bays, so they're going to ship by truck. I mean, they're planning to ship by truck to the
plus
region.
rail and river.
And plus rail and river. And so I said to this guy, I said, what would that mean to you? And he said, Kozera. He says, you see those 5 silos? He said, they're full of product. And he said, that doesn't count what I already own that's riding the rails between here and the Gulf Coast. He said, if I could get delivery that fast, he said, I wouldn't need that. He said, do you know what it costs me in inventory? Yeah. And so that's exactly what Joe's talking about. Can you imagine the competitive advantage for companies in this region? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things is we at Shale Crescent, because can you imagine for the last 30 years? I mean, you and I remember what it was like when things were made in the USA. I mean, I grew up in the 60s, the 70s. The big three were Ford, Chrysler, GM. I mean, yeah. I mean, that we knew that. If the stuff around the house, it was all made in the USA. If it was made in China or Japan, back in those years, it was junk. Not true anymore. So, people don't remember. The young people today, if you say made in the USA, they don't remember what it was like. Can you imagine what happens? And we just did another study that's really important, and it's kind of where Shell fits in. Can you imagine if you're part of these 70% of companies in this region that are making stuff out of that polyethylene, and they're getting most of it from the Gulf Coast, soon Shell. When you start buying your product regionally at Shell, what we saw was their cost drops. And they actually now, we did a study and we took various products that this region can now manufacture cheaper than China. So, and that's hard to go back to companies.
That just raised a bunch of eyebrows in our audience, too.
Well,
but it's great. Yeah.
And we ran the numbers. I mean, it's phenomenal, and it's not that complicated. But the challenge is when you do something, just like, you and I remember made in the USA in the 70s. The average American doesn't even remember that. They think it's all made in China. So to get some of these companies to think in terms of, and when I go to them, I said, look, do you know if there's a $500 million worth of stuff that we import every year from Asia alone? Can you imagine looking at that market, and if you're a processor, if you're making stuff, look at what we're importing, and if you can make that, you can probably make it cheaper, more competitively. And so when we started looking at these products, what we saw, Pete, was ocean transportation. If you make it here, imagine, just using Eagle. You make the product, you get your energy here, you get your feedstock here, it's 60 miles away. You're making a product. Can you imagine China trying to compete with that? Mm-hmm. They're going to be getting oil from the Middle East as their feedstock. They're using coal for their electricity. And then they're going to, and that's a shipping just to get the oil. Then they're going to ship that product 15,000 miles on ocean, most of it, to get it here. Eagle makes it. Their product is 60 miles, their raw material 60 miles away. They're on top of their gas. And we're the customers, right here. So you eliminate the transportation. What you've done is you've dramatically reduced your cost. And all of a sudden, what we're seeing today is American companies not just compete with China and some of these other Asian countries, they can win. And labor is a small portion. That was the other part of the study that showed that labor is a very small part of the cost because of automation, because energy and raw materials and ocean transportation are now the big three costs. So, and what do we have in this region? We got the customers, we've got energy, we've got the raw materials.
And great hands.
And great hands. We got labor, we've got water in our rivers. Mm-hmm. What an opportunity that we have. And then as a bonus, because I didn't do the study, Joe Eddy was part of it. We had another engineering group that really helped us with this thing, and Nathan was involved. And I'm looking at the results, and I'm the guy that kind of adds context to their work. And I looked at it and I said, did you guys look at emissions? And these engineers and Nathan all looked at me and said, what are you talking about? I said, did you ever think about what happens to emissions when your feedstock and your energy and your customers are all here, and you're not shipping it, you're shipping it a few hundred miles. Can you imagine what that does to emissions? And I was like, no, we never did think of that. So can you imagine, my message to your viewers is if you want to really, if you're serious about climate change, if you're serious about cleaning up the planet, one thing every one of us can do is buy American. Mm-hmm. And, maybe it's here, but even if it's coming from Texas or someplace, if you're buying American, you're reducing those emissions, that transportation and that cost of Middle East oil going to China to make stuff. And, Chinese are using coal-fired electricity. Well, the rest of the story, because of my Halliburton background, we were involved with coal bed methane in West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. And what we can do here is we take that gas out of the mines before the miners get there. They started that in 80. I was working with Dr. Thacker of CNX, or Consol, now CNX, in the 80s when we did those pilots, and it was phenomenal. You won't see any mine deaths from methane explosions for the last 40-some years in Virginia. But can you imagine, I worked on some Chinese projects, and China has some of the gassiest coal on the planet. And they have some technical issues because of the Himalayas and the rock stresses that they really can't do what we do to get that gas out ahead of mining. So what happens? The Chinese mine that coal, and where's that methane go? It goes to the atmosphere. So in addition to, nobody's talking about that because they don't know about it, but they're not just going to burn that coal. They're pouring methane into the atmosphere every day. So how do we fix that? We make it here. We take some of that manufacturing and bring it here to the U.S. and to this region. And that creates jobs, that builds our economy, and what else does it do?
Yeah, I want to emphasize that because everyone's saying, so what does this have to do with me? Well, first of all, there's going to be more demand for the product, which is going to make the farmers happy.
Amen.
And second, there's going to be more demand for labor. Now, some of the labor, if you're running a cracker plant, you're going to have some pretty good training. But building the plant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, there's going to be a lot of need for labor, and it just if it begins to happen, it's going to be extraordinary what happens to this area. So,
and to your point, it's actually already happening. When
again with Monaca,
but even in West Virginia, the Manufacturers Association, they're already seeing this growth, not just from Monaca, but we're already seeing companies like TCL. They don't have anything to do with Monaca, but when we talked to them in 18, we explained to them that this whole concept of your feedstock and your customers. So what TCL's going to do, they're making a food additive. Butane is part of the feedstock for that. But they're servicing U.S. customers today. They're making the product in India and shipping it here. And what are they going to do? They're going to use our energy, our feedstock, our labor, those are really good jobs. And where are they going to sell it? They're going to sell that product right here in the U.S. They've eliminated all that transportation.
And you mentioned it was made in India. TCL is an Indian company,
exactly,
which means we have foreign dollars flowing into the area.
Exactly.
Which, I mean,
and that's why Nathan's going there. We were actually invited by TCL at a huge Reliance Industries, a huge company in India, and they started talking to us in 18. Their president saw me at a conference, and he said, I was going to introduce myself, and somehow he knew. He looked at me and he says, you come to India and speak. And we couldn't afford to do that then. But now they invited us, and we got to go. So Nathan Lord, our president, is going to be speaking at that ICC conference in first week of March in Mumbai. And why? They're interested in coming here because what don't they have? They don't have energy. And so what they're going to be those companies are going to be looking at doing what TCL did, and in some cases they'll make an intermediary product using our energy and ship it back to India. But they've grasped the concept that it makes sense to do it where the energy is and where the customers are. So that's what's going on. And to your point, the jobs. When I was at the WVMA meeting, their winter meeting in December, there wasn't a company there, and we're talking about you name it, Covestro. You can get on the river to DuPont, Chemours, Charleston, but every company that was there is hiring. Now, getting those, that's the challenge is we got to have some trained people. And even the building trades are looking for apprentices. So when I talk to young people, I was an adjunct at Pierpont, and I told those young people, I said, look, all you've got to do is graduate. I got them second year. I did a leadership course for them. You got to graduate in May and be drug-free. And you have a $60,000 a year job waiting for
Oh,
you.
yeah. Even, well, we just did a show on union apprenticeship programs.
Oh, those are phenomenal.
Yeah. And
I
you
love
get, you
that.
get paid where you're going to school, which is not a bad
And
thing.
we work close with the unions over there, the building trades, and that's exactly what they were telling me. And so rather than having a kid, if they don't know what they're going to do, be an apprentice. You're right. Learn while you learn.
No college debt is a nice place to be.
And even and even my students, 2-year degree, they're costing them $15,000, and they got a $60,000 a year job. And then I asked this particular year, I did that a few years, and this one year all I had was guys. But I asked them, I said, well, okay, guys, what are you going to do? Now you're making about $20,000 because they were all working. So what are you going to do with that money? What do you think? First thing they told me, every one of them wanted to buy a pickup truck.
Yeah. From my standpoint, I was hoping they were all going to say, I'm going to get an IRA, but that's.
No, not yet. They didn't. The financial community needs to work on those
I know.
guys because first was a pickup truck, and they knew what it looked like, the color, the wheels, the sound system. Second, though, was really cool. It was a house. They want to get married. They want to have kids. And I've already got a young man is our doctor's kid, and he got into the program, and he's got the house. He's got the pickup truck, got the house, and he's got the wife, and now he's got the kid.
That's really
I mean,
wonderful.
isn't that what we want for West Virginia, even for Southern
right.
Ohio? Now, the third one, though, should have been maybe financial planning. They weren't thinking about that. It was WVU season football tickets.
Whatever works.
But think about that. Think about it. We have young people that are, that's the whole idea. Bring manufacturing here. We got good jobs. They're raising families. They're growing our
Quality
state
of life is getting
population.
better, yeah.
And what are they going to do? They're going to support the universities with football tickets because they can afford it. And all those others, we look at, Rebecca McPhail said, for every, industry job, there's 4 to 5 other jobs created, and it makes sense. I mean, can you imagine if one of these young men and young women are making 50 or 60 grand a year? What are they going to do Friday night? They're probably going to eat out. Maybe they're going to go to a movie. Or if it's a special day, they're going to buy their spouse flowers. That builds the flower shop up. So all these other small businesses are going to feed off of that because now they've got young people out there. They're going to raise a family. Well, they got to buy cribs, they got to buy car seats, and those car seats. That was one of them. When we looked at product, can you imagine 60% of the cost of a child's car seat, if you buy it in China, is ocean transportation. So if we made those darn things here, you eliminate 60% of your cost because you're going to make it here. And it's, I guess the problem is they're kind of big, so they take up space. They don't weigh a whole lot, but they're big and bulky, so that cost is significant. So, but that's the whole idea.
Well, we're running short on time. I want to thank you for this and your enthusiasm. I'll be having you back sooner than you think.
We love it.
Because there are a lot of other things that I've got on my question sheet that we haven't gotten.
Sorry about that, Chief.
No. And I think it's important that people do understand how this can really turn out. Now, we're going to have, I believe, your internet address running below you from
Good.
time to time. You said there will be studies on there and maybe links to tapes. You just sent me that. It was
Right.
2 hours long. I just haven't had a chance to
Well,
look at it.
and my part of it's only about probably 30 minutes.
Okay.
But we've got, there's videos on there. We just did a presentation for the American states in Europe, their consortium that they're working together. West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania are part of that. We did an energy presentation last week. But what do the Europeans want to come here? I mean, why? Because we get energy. They don't. So they're going to bring jobs. And I was mentioning one of the companies we talked to at Select USA that's interested in the region is a glass company. They have operations in Ukraine. or maybe had is the word. But why do they want to come here? And they talked to me and they said, Mr. Kozera, here's how much gas we need. We need it for the next 20 years. Can you guys
They're
handle
not
that?
dependent on Russia.
Right, and if you ever shut their gas supply off, that glass solidifies, it's over. So that's the kind of companies that want to come here, and they're all bringing good jobs. So I think that's really, for this region, this is our opportunity now. We've got abundant natural gas. Matter of fact, if we were a country, for those that don't know, we would be the number 3 natural gas producer
We
in the world.
meaning
West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. That's what we did.
just 3 states.
3 states, and that's why when we start looking at this thing as a region, when you look at it in states, it doesn't mean much, but when you put the 3 together, and that's a big deal, because can you imagine the U.S. without our gas is number 1, Russia's number 2, Shale Crescent USA, our 3 states produce more than twice as much gas as the entire country of China. So what's that say? We got the gas, they don't. They have to pay to get it. So,
Start utilizing
so
it.
that, I think that's really the opportunity. We've got the resources, we've got the workforce, we've got the location, and we're gonna create an environmental advantage here. Matter of fact, it's the only, right now, it's the only defense we have against China pouring garbage into the atmosphere every day.
That's it. Well, again, I want to thank you for what you and your crew are doing and for your optimism. It will be paying off, just like your story of the
Oh, I'm
saga.
excited. This is
That's
cool.
great. And I want to thank you all. I'm Pete Holloway. We'll be seeing you next week.